The Men Who Stare at Goats movie review. This is a fascinating little movie about the Army's investigation into psychic activities. It is one of those films that after you watch it, you immediately run to the internet to research how much of this is true and how much of this is fiction. In my opinion, it's also one of those movies that is interesting in the proportion that it's true. So if all of this is true, then this is absolutely an amazing, incredible movie. If most of this is fiction, then maybe I'm not so impressed with the movie and maybe parts of the story were a little bit underwhelming. The movie opens with the tantalizing line that it is mostly true. Or actually, in their exact words, quote, "More of this is true than you would believe." The rest of the movie often assumes a tone that almost leads you to believe you're watching a semi-documentary. It's told through the voice of a reporter who appears to be documenting everything as he is going, and it is mixed in with facts and historical tidbits. For example, they cite Reagan's support of the psychic program. While I was watching this movie, I was under the impression that this was pretty much all a true story. Maybe a couple composite characters, maybe a few composite events, but I got the impression from watching the movie that this was all more or less true. However, after finishing the movie, I did just the bare amount of internet research, by which I mean I went to Wikipedia, and based on the Wikipedia page, I'm led to believe that it was loosely based on a documentary, but mostly made up. I'm not sure. If somebody out there knows more about this than me, and if you know anything about it, you know more about this than me, let me know in the comments section maybe how much of this is accurate and how much of this is fiction. At any rate, the movie has a very interesting premise. Now, the premise for this movie is summed up rather succinctly in a conversation between two generals, which occurs about halfway through the movie. And I'm just going to maybe quote that conversation in full, because I think that conversation does a good job of outlining how the Army got into investigations into psychics and paranormal activities. So this is a conversation that took place between two characters in the movie. "When did the Soviets begin this type of research?" This type of research meaning psychic research. "Well, sir, it looks like they found out about our attempts to telepathically communicate with one of our subs, the Nautilus. Well, it was under the polar ice cap." "What attempt?" "There was no attempt. Seems the story was a French hoax. But the Russians think the story about the story being a French hoax is just a story, sir. So they've started doing psychic research because they thought we were doing psychic research, when in fact we weren't doing psychic research." "Yes, sir. But now that they're doing psychic research, we might have to do psychic research, sir. We can't afford to have the Russians leading the field in the paranormal." Now, this conversation sounded to me like it was straight out of Dr. Strangelove. In fact, I was waiting for them to say something like, "We can't afford to have a paranormal gap," and, just make the allusion to Dr. Strangelove complete. Now, how much of this is true, or I don't know. Given that the military designs contingency plans for just about everything, whether it's realistic or not, I can believe they would have a contingency plan for the paranormal. And given that the military is infamous for wasting money, that like they're a huge pork barrel money machine where they just get loads of money from Congress, I can totally believe that they would set up a paranormal activities research division and just waste a whole bunch of pork barrel taxpayer spending. What I find a bit unbelievable, and which is what is portrayed in this film, is that in this film, having set up this division, they don't turn it over to real scientists. They turn it over to New Age shamans, hippies, and failed science fiction writers who are running this division. Is it true? I mean, I don't know. Maybe. If it is true, it's pretty bizarre. I'm reminded of the old quote, "The truth is always stranger than fiction." Now, the story is told in this movie in two parts. One part is a flashback to the 1980s when the whole program began. It's not particularly relevant to contemporary events, but it's an interesting little piece of history from the 1980s. The other part of the story, which acts as the frame for these flashbacks, takes place during the current Iraq War, or at least current when this film came out, where apparently the psychic and paranormal division was still being employed, running experiments on Iraqi prisoners and torturing them by putting them in a solitary cell with strobe lights and Barney music from Barney the Dinosaur, the children's TV program. Now, I found the constant switching back and forth between the frame story and the flashback story a little bit disorienting as I was watching the movie. Just when you're starting to get into one of the stories, they pull you out and throw you into the other. But no doubt, taken as a whole, this film is one amazing story. The flashbacks to the 1980s show a bizarre world in which, at least for a brief time, it appears that pseudoscience was given free rein in a small section of the US military. The Iraqi war parts show a bizarre world in which private entrepreneurs are convinced that Iraq is going to be a new gold mine of private investment, and private security contractors get into firefights with each other. And then the hapless Iraqi locals are trapped in between. And again, they do voiceovers in which the Ewan McGregor character drops in facts, like he tells the audience how many casualties resulted from this firefight between two different private security teams, which certainly gives the audience the impression that this was a true story based on real events. If this turns out that it was not a true story based on real events, and again, somebody let me know in the comments if you know better than me, if it wasn't true, then that was manipulative of the audience. If that was true, then wow. Wow. Moving on to commenting on the acting. There's a really stellar cast in this film. Jeff Bridges, Ewan McGregor, Kevin Spacey, George Clooney, and they all do a fantastic job. Jeff Bridges, I think, has got typecast as the crazy hippie character ever since The Big Lebowski. And he's playing a crazy hippie army commander in this movie, but he does a great job as a crazy hippie army commander. Kevin Spacey is one of my all-time favorite actors, and I know I shouldn't say that anymore because of the scandals involving his personal life, but putting that aside, just judging his career as an actor, I really love him as an actor. And he's got some great scenes in this, especially near the end when he's explaining the new Iraq War psychic operations. And then he has a fit and starts throwing pencils at one of his subordinates who brings up an abandoned project. I'm not describing it well, but when you see it on the film, it's just a fantastic scene. The ending was a bit disappointing, and I guess this again comes back to the question about whether or not this is a true story or not. If it's all based on a true story, then you can't really criticize the ending because, you know, they were stuck with the ending because of real events. If this was a largely fictional story, then maybe that ending could have been better. Maybe somebody should have rewritten it. I don't know. Again, I'm going to have to just say, I really don't know how much of this was actually true and how much of this was not. So again, let me know in the comments if you know better than I do, and also let me know what you thought about this movie in terms of entertainment value. I personally found it very entertaining.